Starting in a few seconds. Okay. So, time to start. Welcome to this celebrating Earth Day. The 51st Earth Day, actually, with the theme Restore Our Earth. And we're really happy that you're joining this lunch talk with us. My name is Kristina Karlmark. I am a climate reality leader. And I will guide us through this talk today. Lots of people joining. Wonderful to see you all. I am in Stockholm. It snowed just a few minutes ago, but spring is here, which is really nice. Today, this talk, we will meet Marie Kvarnström, a biologist, a researcher, an activist. You've seen the theme for today, to explore indigenous and traditional knowledge on sustainable ways of living, climate, and biodiversity. So that's what we're going to do. But before I let Marie come in, I want to present the two hosts, Climate Reality and 2022 Initiative Foundation. So we're going to start with Climate Reality, and that's going to be done by Bradley Martz-Zigala. So please, Bradley, what is Climate Reality?
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Bradley Martz-Zigala. I'm a climate reality leader currently based in the middle of nowhere, Finland, about 5 hours north of Helsinki. Just to briefly introduce the Climate Reality Project, it's a nonprofit NGO that was founded by Al Gore in 2006 with a mission to catalyze a global solution to the climate crisis. Through its training program, the Climate Reality Leadership Corps, over 31,000 activists have been trained, and almost 3,000 of them are currently residing and actively working towards climate solutions in Europe. Today, we're hosted with the European branch, which works independently in its own regions at community, national, and regional levels. And in addition to raising awareness about the climate crisis through education, we also have a focus on partnering with businesses and political leaders to ensure a just transition to a clean energy economy and promoting climate solutions in traditional coal economies. So we know that the climate crisis cannot be resolved without climate justice. We can't leave anyone behind, and that is why we are having this talk today. So, and I think back to you, Kristina.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bradley. Yes, that's Climate Reality. And the other host is 2022 Initiative Foundation. And here we have Helena Lindemark, who is the founder and chairman of this foundation. So Helena, would you tell us what it's all about?
Thank you, Kristina. I would like to share my screen to show a few slides. I would also say that I'm also a climate reality leader, trained in Berlin in 2018. The 2022 Initiative Foundation is a nonprofit foundation that has been accelerating and co-creating sustainability since 2014. The name is related to the fact that in 2022, it will be 50 years since we had the first UN conference on sustainable development. It was held in Stockholm, Sweden, where I'm based. The theme was Only One Earth. And we still only have one Earth that is about this tiny based on how we're treating it. So we really need to take care of it. So Earth Day should be every day. And the Stockholm conference was very much a pioneer and trendsetter. It was the first time that civil society organizations were allowed to address the delegates in the plenary sessions. Olof Palme, the Swedish Prime Minister at the time, mentioned that we need a law to end ecocide, something that the Pope is talking about today. And there was actually an early form of sharing economy with 500 bicycles shared among the delegates. And most important of all, the UN Environment Program was formed at the Stockholm Conference. Back in 2014, I thought that we have a lot of solutions, so we should be able to solve all this in 50 years' time. And in 2015, we have 2 major agreements. Finally, we know where we want to be in 2030 and beyond. It's not that difficult for today's leaders to agree on these long-term goals, but to get action now, we need milestones. And 2022 is actually not only 50 years since the Stockholm Conference, it's also about halfway to 2030 since both these important agreements. So there can be an important milestone to get action now. And it will be, because thanks to our advocacy, we have inspired the Swedish government to propose a high-level UN conference in Stockholm in June next year, the Stockholm +50 conference. And as we all know, most of us, I think here, it is crucial that we act now. We need to bend the curves now. So 2022 and the Stockholm +50 conference is a unique opportunity to get action now. And to have engagement from all over the world, we need to have conferences all around the world that are connected digitally to be global. This was actually part of our proposal back in 2019. And now, thanks to the pandemic, we know that this is possible. It will get a lot more engagement and lower CO2 emissions from traveling. And now it would also be more pandemic safe. And as we all know, and the subject of today is that Indigenous people have a lot of knowledge on how we can live more in harmony with nature. This is Jon Henrik Fjellgren. He's an artist, a reindeer herder, and Sami from the northern parts of Europe. And he's our ambassador within the 2022 Initiative Foundation. So I'm very glad that we today initiate this series of events together with Climate Reality Leaders Europe. So thank you very much and very welcome again.
Thank you, Helena. A very important mission there. So those are the 2 host organizations, and we're going to have a talk now with Marie. You, in the audience, you have the opportunity to ask questions in the end. We will pick them up. You can write them in the chat, and you can also post them on Facebook, either on 2022 or on Climate Reality. We'll try and pick them up there. So that's your way of pitching in. And Bradley will join me in this talk with Marie. So, Marie Kvarnström, very welcome to this lunch talk. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be with you. Really, really pleased. I'm not a member of Climate Reality yet, but maybe from today, hopefully I can join you. You do excellent work. So shall I just start?
Yes, please go ahead and tell us who you are and your background and what brought you to this important area that we will talk about.
Because time is
always critical.
Very, very critical, very precious. So I want to show some pictures first. And just to tell you who I am, I work, my name is Marie Kvarnström, and I work at the Swedish Biodiversity Center. And we have collaborated for about 20 years with Indigenous peoples in different parts of the world and in Sweden, our Sami people in Sweden. And we also work with traditional knowledge in Sweden. With Swedes also have traditional knowledge, which is similar, of course, to Indigenous knowledge. So I'll talk a little bit about this, and I will share my screen with you. How can I do that? There we are. Come on, there we are. Can you see it? Yes, good. So I will start with, I will show you some photos of our work in Sweden and around the world. But first I want to go through some definitions and some background. And I also want to say that, like Christina said, you're welcome to ask questions at the end and we'll have a dialogue. But also if there's anything that you think is unclear or want to know more about, you're more than welcome to contact me afterwards. We'll make sure that you get my email I don't want to write it anywhere now because I'll screw up my screen here. But Christina, can you remind me that I share my email? Because I think it's really important, if there's anything unclear, anything you want to know more about, that you're able to contact me, okay? So first of all, I would like to just let us think a bit about the definition of Indigenous peoples. And here I say it's important that I say peoples and not people, because the Indigenous peoples view themselves as having a historical existence and identity that is separate and independent of the states now enveloping them. And also it's important that lands located in a specific geographic area form a central element in their history and identity, and are central regarding their contemporary political demands. Do you also get the people here? Shall I try to change my screen so you don't? Do you see me and Bradley and Christina?
Yeah, I think everybody, if you click up in the right-hand corner, you can decide how many people you want to see, and you can see only Marie and her page if you want to.
And you're spotlighted, Marie, so it doesn't matter what you see. We see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you see my screen better. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we see it fine.
So all right. So after this definition, we also have to look at ILO 169, where there is also a good definition of Indigenous peoples. There are various definitions of Indigenous peoples, and no one is the right one, but it's very important, and also stated in this ILO 169, which I will come to soon, that it's also a matter of self-identification, that a group or a people view themselves as an Indigenous people. And the ILO 169 is a convention. It's the Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention, which was signed and entered into force in 1981. And here you can find the full text of the ILO convention. It is an important convention. Sweden is one of the countries that has not yet ratified it, to the dissatisfaction of myself and many other people, and to this is heavily criticized by the Sami parliament in Sweden, the parliament of the Sami people in Sweden. So I just hope that very soon Sweden will ratify this very important convention, which is about the rights of Indigenous peoples and tribal peoples. There's also the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which has been signed and adopted within the framework of the United Nations. And they have their annual meeting, this week, and I will come back to that. Another important convention is the Convention on Biological Diversity, where there is one article, Article 8J, which states that each contracting party, and that's nearly all the states on the earth, except the Vatican and the United States. So each contracting party shall, as far as possible and as appropriate, subject to its national legislation, respect, preserve, and maintain knowledge, innovations, and practices of Indigenous and local communities, embodying traditional lifestyles relevant for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and promote their wider application with the approval and involvement of the holders of such knowledge, innovations, and practices, and encourage the equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of such knowledge, innovations, and practices. And this is a very important article, which has also raised the voice of indigenous peoples in the work to implement the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is as far-reaching really as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And you all know that just as we're facing a climate crisis, a climate disaster, we're also facing a huge loss of biological diversity, which is as serious as the climate crisis. And it's important for everyone to know and respect that the voice of indigenous peoples is heard in the Convention on Biodiversity, and also that indigenous and local knowledge, traditional knowledge, is regarded as equally important as scientific knowledge in this convention. The United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is an important body to strengthen the rights of indigenous peoples. This is a high-level advisory body to the Economic and Social Council, and it provides expert advice and recommendations on indigenous issues to the Economic and Social Council, and also to programs and funds and agents, other programs and funds and agencies of the UN. It raises awareness and promotes the integration and coordination of activities related to indigenous issues. It prepares and disseminates information on indigenous issues. And lastly, but not least, it promotes respect for the full application of the provisions of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and follow up the effectiveness of this declaration, the UNDRIP, the declaration that I showed you just a little bit earlier. And the fourth meeting of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues started this week on Monday, and it is ongoing. And if you are interested, you can follow the proceedings of the fourth meeting of the Permanent Forum meeting on UN Web TV. And this is the site, and you can quite easily find it. It starts 9 a.m. New York time, so it will start 3 o'clock Central European time today. So if you're interested, there will be time for you to follow the proceedings. This is a high-level meeting, and it's very formal, so don't expect it to be very entertaining, but a very important meeting. In Sweden, the Sami parliament, Sametinget, is the body that has been given the mandate by the Swedish government to be lead agent for local and traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge. And I just want to show you here that the Sami parliament has an environment program called Elinbiras. And if you read the introduction to this environment, to the Sami environment program, they say that the Sami view of nature as an animated living being stands in strong contrast to the Western view of nature. Our view of nature, says the parliament, the Sami parliament, has characterized our values, customs, social structures, and relationships. Our view of life builds our common core value that is reflected in the Sami language. Sapmi is our home. Sapmi is the land of the Sami people. If we or someone else destroys nature, our culture is destroyed as well. And I will come back later during our dialogue to the situation of the Sami people today in Sweden and the challenges that they face. And now I just briefly show you some photos of our work in Sweden. And as I said, we work both with international collaboration with Indigenous peoples and other groups of people embodying a traditional lifestyle. And we also have our own people in Sweden who embody a traditional lifestyle, i.e. summer farmers who take the animals in the same way that they have done for centuries to forest and mountain pastures in the summer and live very closely with their animals in a way which is completely different from the way cattle keeping is done in the rest of Sweden. So here there is a richness of traditional knowledge and ways of living with the animals and of the products of the animals, like this woman who has worked all her life with the summer pasture practice, and here she's just made the local butter, and that she will later sell to tourists, and some of it is for their own consumption. But also other land use activities like fishing, a lot of it is done in a traditional way. This is a friend of mine, Jocke Boström, who works very, very closely with small-scale fishermen in the very north of Sweden, carrying out their fishing in the same way they have always done. And they face a lot of challenges also today, and we try to support them as best we can. Also in mainstream Swedish culture, people try to keep alive the old traditions and the old ways of working, also as a way of conserving biodiversity. And this also includes craftsmanship. This is a group who are very happy because they have just completed a course where they all produce their own scythe handles from local materials. And this is from a course in using wool for making mittens and boots in a traditional way. Another course using old crafts to repair windows, doors, other things. We also collaborate with other peoples. Like I said, this is a Maasai man who came to visit us in Sweden together with Maasai colleagues, and was fortunate enough to be at a meeting of traditional Swedish summer farmers. The man on the right, Tepp Lars Arneson, is a key person to keep alive the Swedish traditions. And in the background, you can see horses who do their annual tour in the way the farmers used to for centuries. And the Maasai quickly realized that we have exactly the same kind of sour milk that they prepare in Tanzania. And he saw so many similarities of the ways that local people in Sweden view their place in the ecosystem and their relation to other living beings and to nature. We also collaborate with Romania, where a lot of the practices are done the way they have it for centuries. These are young boys milking sheep, and they have the same kind of summer farming practices that we have still in some parts of Sweden. This is much more widespread in Romania, but also threatened because the young people mostly leave Romania parts of the year. In the summertime, they perhaps come home, but they also face challenges in maintaining their old traditions. One of their skills that they use is guard dogs, to guard against predators, bears and wolves. This is something that we are learning in Sweden, and we are learning a lot from Romania in because it's a skill how to train these dogs so that they will stay with the sheep or stay with the cows and become real protectors against predators. Now, this practice of grazing in the summer pastures creates a very rich biodiversity. This is a hillside in Romania where you can see the profusion of wildflowers. This is another one. So these old practices, they really work together with nature and not against nature, together with biodiversity. And that's why they are so important in the implementation of the Convention of Biodiversity. That's why this traditional knowledge is so important. One of the reasons that it's so important. And in our collaboration, we would really try to learn from the elders and from all the different peoples that we work together with. And we realize that they have so much more knowledge than we have. And it's important for us to be very humble in our dialogue and in our collaboration. Just a few more photos before we start the dialogue. We have also collaborated with and still do with Peruvian colleagues. This is a meeting high in the Andes in Peru. I was a bit, actually, I got a bit of height sickness at this meeting because it was a little too much for me. These people see it as fundamental to maintain their traditions and to transfer their knowledge to the next generation. You can see the children in the right-hand corner eagerly learning from these ladies. And these men playing their own handmade flutes. You can see that they have their clothes are made locally in the village, and they were immensely proud that that was the case. Not everybody had their own handmade clothes, but these had, and they were very, very proud of it. So the traditional knowledge of these peoples, it's a holistic way of living, really, and culture, music, clothing, caring for the earth, agriculture, it's all part of a whole. And it's all based on a view of living that they call suma kausai, locally in the Quechua language, or good living in English. And it's a concept and a way of life that I think is extremely important for us for the future. A ceremony in Bolivia, again, thanking the earth for all she has given during the past year and asking for renewed gifts for the coming year by giving back some of what we have received from her. And our mutual affection in thanking each other in all that we do. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Marie. Really nice and vivid to see the pictures and seeing also the similarities from so many different parts of this earth. That's really reassuring. Nice. Thank you. So Bradley and Bradley, I think you have the first question for Marie, actually.
I do, and we actually have questions coming in through about 30 viewers on Facebook Live, in addition to those currently with us on Zoom. But thank you for that presentation and intro. I have so many questions, but we would like to start with, what can this knowledge teach us about living sustainably and within planetary boundaries? And can this knowledge also be part of a solution in mitigating the climate and biodiversity crises?
I'll share my screen again. Share there, and I will go down a little bit. Oops. Okay, so to begin my answer, 2 years ago, there was a global assessment report on biodiversity and ecosystem service, the state of biodiversity. What is the threat? I mean, it's the threat of biodiversity loss and climate crisis. It was done by what's called IPBES. You see, it's a Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And one of the main conclusions, I'm just quoting here from the conclusions of this landmark report, they said that transformations towards sustainability are more likely when efforts are directed at the following key leverage points, where efforts yield exceptionally large effects. And the first is visions of a good life. And here I can't underscore enough that Indigenous peoples' cosmovisions, ways of life, it really can give leadership. The second leverage point is total consumption and waste, lowering, of course, our total consumption and lowering our waste. Again, many Indigenous peoples are excellent leaders in this, and we can learn a lot. Leading simpler lives, repairing, reusing everything we have. And here we have, of course, an enormous challenge with our governments, and also with private enterprise, because our governments want our consumption to go up. In Sweden this morning, they said, oh, Volvo cars in Sweden, no, not Volvo cars, the other Volvo is really have a very optimistic outlook for this year, making more and more cars, and we should all applaud that. So we need to find ways to lower our total consumption and yet have sustainable societies. Well, it's the only way to sustainable consumption, sustainable societies. The third is values and action. And like I said, again, the Indigenous people's cosmovisions will teach us about values and also about action. The fourth key leverage point is inequalities. And here we need to respect the rights of Indigenous peoples, and all of these bodies and conventions, declarations that I showed in the beginning are aiming at that, and also aiming at justice and inclusion in conservation. So this is my first part of answering that question then.
Christina, forgive me for jumping around a little bit, but here at this point, justice and inclusion and conservation, what would climate justice and environmental justice as a whole then look like for Indigenous peoples?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? That's a very big question, but it would mean full respect of their rights and the rights according to Indigenous peoples. And there are ongoing fights and dialogues in many countries regarding the rights of Indigenous peoples, and a lot of it is also related to land rights, to rights to use land and to govern land use. And all of these bodies that and convention I showed you in the beginning, it would mean justice and inclusion would mean that all of these, what is said in these conventions and declarations is respected. It's not today. We're on the road, but we have a long way to go.
Thanks, Marie.
Christina? Yeah, I actually have something to ask connected to this, because you talked about the good life, and then you touched on the governments and saying that it's good or bad that we build more cars. Because here we have two different paradigms, right?
Yeah.
So how do you see that we come closer or understand, or what are the solutions for meeting around the good life that is actually needed for sustainability?
I think, but this is just me, not just a very small person. I believe that first of all of us who work with the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis, we need to internalize ourselves values and action that is in accordance with the space we have on this earth. And I mean, I myself, I very seldom buy anything, because I'm a very bad consumer in the in the eyes of my government, but it can be done, and I know it can be done. I think our politicians are afraid, and I think we have to be the leaders, but also in our dialogue with, for instance, company CEOs, to make them understand that this is possible. And it's the only way.
Yeah. Rethink things. When we had the pre-talk the other day, I told you I had got a binocular for birds, and then you said you're looking for a second-hand one, and I was like, ah. On the other hand, yesterday I was going to buy an inner tube for my bike, and they didn't have any inner tubes, and he was like, yeah, we don't know when they're coming in. And after talking for a while, I said, do you have one of those kits that you could fix it? And he didn't think of it, and it took me some time. So now I'm going to fix my bike. Then I felt much better. So we can all get better at this, right?
Yeah, we can all get better, and I mean, wherever we are, we can get better, and it's the only way to start.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the next question. The planned theme of the Stockholm Plus 50 conference in 2022 is a healthy planet for the prosperity of all, our responsibility, our opportunity. These communities living closer to nature, such as the Sami and other indigenous peoples, the effects of changing climate and biodiversity are already obvious and escalating. How can this awareness they have be used on the journey to a healthy planet?
Well, it is already it's starting to be used. For instance, in the IPCC, the International or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there is also now Indigenous work included, and Indigenous voices showing the effect of climate change. Also, for instance, in the Arctic Council, which is a council of nations in the Arctic, including, of course, countries like the US, Canada, China, Russia, and the Nordic countries. The indigenous people have quite a strong voice, so they are part of it, and we can all help to bring it out more. I think all of us who work with climate action can get better at finding the voices of indigenous peoples. And I should have included something from the IPCC or from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, but we can look for that later on. A good place to find reports from indigenous peoples on the climate. Yeah.
And these opportunities, sharing this knowledge, how can we use that to heal both the earth and the relationship between communities?
Yeah, so again, going back to ourselves, healing our own relationship with the world around us and with nature, being out in nature as much as we can. And again, working to get our decision makers, our governments, to respect the rights of both indigenous, well, first and foremost, indigenous peoples, and also traditional knowledge holders in our own countries. If I can I show you an example from a very recent example with the Sami, because they face challenges today. So if I can share my screen again, is that okay?
Yeah,
please
sure.
do.
Okay. So, oops. Yeah. So, yeah. So this is a recent article, actually, in Aftonbladet, one of the main Swedish newspapers, and it's a quote from a Sami woman, one of my Sami friends, where she says that if the forestry machines come, we will just have to stand in front of them. It's a desperate voice, actually, because this is my friend Britta Stina Shago, who's a reindeer herder and also Sami activist, and she's an immensely strong and wonderful person. I'm very proud to know her and be her friend. And this is an example of, what a reindeer grazing area today looks like, and it's a disaster. This is also, again, from this article. It says there are just a few tiny remnants on the side of the road, and this used to be full of trees with lichens that the reindeer depend on in the winter, and on ground lichen that they depend on. Now it's all gone. It's all gone. They have nothing to eat here in the winter. So the Sami in this Sami community had started to feed the reindeer in the winter, and it's that's not very sustainable in the long term, and it's not the best for the reindeer, and they are in an extremely difficult position. This Sami man, he says that they clear cut more and more, faster and faster, and this acute situation that they were facing with more clear logging actually got a solution. It says here that the Sami got support by Greta Thunberg, and the forestry company actually retreated as a result of, not of course only of Greta's support, but of support from the wider Swedish community. So our support when we hear about conflicts and problems that for instance, the Sami and or other indigenous groups in other countries face, our support is very important, sharing knowledge about these conflicts. I also want to show, no, maybe I missed that one, but also, stop sharing. Something most people don't know is that the Sami people, the reindeer in Sweden and Finland and Norway, actually have a big problem with windmills. And windmills are seen as a major solution to the climate crisis, but the reindeer do not graze in areas with windmill parks. They just run through them until they get way away from these windmill parks. And so it constitutes a huge problem for the Sami, for reindeer herders. And I think that needs to be known, and it needs to be recognized that not all climate-friendly solutions are compatible with sustainable ways of using the land.
Thanks, Marie. Context matters so much about where we're trying to apply these solutions today. I think I'd like to ask one last question before we maybe answer some of the questions that we have in the different chats that we have open. But I really loved what you were saying about traditional knowledge. And in our pre-talk, we talked about it quite a bit. But we know who the holders of Indigenous knowledge are, but who are the keepers of traditional knowledge, and how do we reach them, and how do we preserve that knowledge?
So in Sweden, we have worked together with, like I said, small-scale farmers, small-scale fishers, and land users, but also craftspeople. And many times it's elders, because elders are the ones who bring traditions forward. And it's more and more recognized in all of Europe, for instance, that like in Romania, there is a lot of traditional knowledge used in small-scale farming. So how do we find this? Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, because it's different in every part of every country, isn't it? But yeah, so you just have to perhaps get in touch with groups of and organizations, community-based organizations of small-scale land users and craftspeople, and start there.
Thank you. I now have a question from the chat, from Cesar Suarez, who's in Finland, but comes from Brazil, where there are lots of indigenous peoples. And he would like to know if there's any formal connection, collaboration between the Sami and South American indigenous peoples. Do you know?
Well, I know that the Sami, of course, are part in the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and I just guess that there I know that there's a lot of dialogue between different peoples. So I don't know specifically, but
they should.
Yeah, international dialogue is ongoing. Yeah.
Nice. And then I saw something here before about this, the 8J thing you talked about in the beginning, that it was not ratified by the US. Someone wrote here, passing by. Is that right?
That's right.
How come? How come?
Well, this was the convention was agreed in 1992 at the Rio conference, and then the U.S. government then thought that it was not a good thing to ratify it. They signed it, but they haven't ratified it. And
okay.
I guess the reason was that it also talks about the equitable sharing of benefits from the use of genetic resources. And there they said, do we want that? And it was not the government then. I think the US government today, President Biden would probably be in favor of ratifying it. I don't know if it's still possible to ratify it. They are now part of the meetings of the Convention of Biodiversity, but only as observers.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, more to do, right? Do we have any questions from Facebook? Bradley or Helena? No? I will see what we have more here.
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah. Have you seen any special one you want to highlight?
There is one just right now.
Yeah, please.
Our government to hear us about the climate change problems. How do we convince the government to care, especially to hear, especially in the Balkans? This is from Anastasia Voshkosha.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that. I can give my views, and then the rest of you can give your views, because that's your expertise, isn't it? More than me. But I can give my views, and that's I write emails often to, not often, but I sometimes write emails to all the members of the Swedish Parliament. I think that's an excellent way, actually, because I know Parliament members have said of different political parties in Sweden have said that if you get 3 emails about one issue, then you know it's something that I really need to listen to. So I think that's actually quite a good idea to write an email, make it personal, and send it to all of the members of Parliament. And then, of course, there's some groups like, I don't know if you in Climate Reality do things like the Extinction Rebellion, where they go out in the streets and
not yet, but we might.
Not yet. But that's, of course, another way. But those were just my
top of mind. Make yourself heard and seen, right?
Yeah.
And
emails to Parliament members, I think, is not to be underestimated.
That's good. That's really good.
And I think
Bradley.
actually Zsolt will be sharing with us as we wrap up. I see one question that I think I would be nice to get answered, but then afterwards, I think maybe Zsolt can share some more information of how you can get involved yourself in acting, in getting involved. Yes. But I do see another question in the chat, and it is from Tatiana Solokolova. And it's, would ratifying the ILO 169 convention in Sweden make a difference to Sami reindeer herders?
Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. It would make a big difference, definitely. And I just think it's time it's ratified now. It's well past time. Yeah. I just saw also in the chat somebody just shared that the survival there's an organization called Survival International that they're launching a campaign for land rights of indigenous peoples, and Survival International is one way to support the rights of indigenous peoples to be to join up with Survival International. Really recommend. They're a very good organization. Excellent.
That's hands-on for us to do. Wonderful. Thank you, Marie, for sharing your knowledge and your pictures. It's coming alive when you see all these examples that you show to us. Everybody can write emails to the Parliament. That's for us to do, right? It's not difficult. And I've learned a lot by your setting the picture on this very important topic, where we have to have one vision together to go forward. When we had the pre-meeting, you said, Earth is a living being. That I wrote down, and it's like, because that's where it all starts. If we can gather around that, we will make other decisions. And in one of the pictures, it was actually in Swedish, it said that the Sami say, all questions are environmental questions, because everything is environment. And that's also framing the way we see things. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And now I'm giving the word to Zsolt, who's in charge of Climate Reality Europe, to wrap this up and to share how we can engage going forward. Zsolt.
I just want to say before that, I just want to say I just shared my email address in the chat. So
perfect.
It's for anyone if you have more questions to me or comments.
Excellent. Thank you.
So thank you all. Thank you, Marie, for the presentation and for sharing your thoughts. I think these are really important. And I also would like to mention Christina, Helena, Bradley, and Maria's name for organizing this special event for Earth Day and for Climate Ready Europe. I think this is very important for us to listen and learn from Indigenous people, to live the way how they live their life on a similar way ourselves. But at the same time, I think what is even more important and more difficult to share this knowledge to support our next generation to be able to understand why it is so important to listen and learn from these Indigenous people, from those ones that are living a special life comparing to our urbanized, consumer-oriented lifestyle. So I think that is the message that I would like to underline, that we have to take forward this knowledge to the next generation. And how can we make it? I would like to share a few ideas with you. Obviously, follow us on social media if you are not a climate change leader yet, because in the very near future, in autumn, we will have a special global training for looking for new volunteers, new energies to support the climate fight. But if you are already a trained climate ready leader, what I would like to recommend for those ones who are with us on this event, please consider joining our interest groups on climate justice, on Paris Agreement compatible businesses, or Paris Agreement compatible communities, because we will have a lot of good energies, good vibration through those interest groups. But please consider today to live a different life, today to spend your everyday life differently than other days, and maybe follow it after the Earth Day as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Zsolt, and thank you, everybody. We're closing this now and going forward with new knowledge. Thank you. Take care. See you again some other